That plate you dropped, it's coming out of your wages.
The old woman's hands went still in the gray water. Yellow gloves, dripping.
"Which plate?"
She said. Quiet. Almost kind.
Don't play death.
He was writing the number on his pad. The same number he wrote every week. He smiled while he did it, sure she was too old to fight back. He did not know she had been counting. He did not know whose mother she was. Have you ever watched someone be robbed a little at a time, a coin here, an hour there, by a person who was certain no one would ever make them stop? Have you ever been looked at because of your gray hair, your worn coat, the gloves on your hands, and been decided small, while the ones sneering at you had no idea what you could really do? And have you ever wished, just once, that the quiet person at the sink would turn out to be the last person on earth that man should have crossed? This is the story of a woman named Ngozi, a sink full of dirty plates, and a manager named Gavin Pike, who took one look at a tired older woman and decided she was the safest person in the world to steal from. He was wrong, and every coin he took from her, every proud word he said, was one more line he was writing into the case against himself with his own hand. If stories of betrayal and quiet justice move you, take 1 second to subscribe. It truly helps. Now, let's begin. Let me take you back so you understand who this woman really was. Ngozi had spent 31 years doing one quiet thing, and doing it right. She worked in payroll, wages, hours, overtime, and the little line at the bottom of the slip marked deductions. For 31 years, she sat in small back offices and made sure the cleaner and the driver and the shop girl all got paid exactly what they were owed, not a penny more, not a penny less. She could read a payslip the way a nurse reads a chart. One glance, and she knew if it was healthy or if someone had been at it with a knife. And she knew the law. She knew what a company may take from your wages and what it may never, ever take. Because a wage is not a favor. A wage is a debt they owe you the second the work is done. Bayo taught her that. Her husband. Bayo worked with his hands his whole life. He loaded trucks at a big depot on the edge of the city, lifting, stacking, hauling, from before the sun came up. He came home every night and set his gloves on the windowsill. Thick leather gloves, cracked and worn, shaped to his own fingers after all those years. He'd rub his sore hands, and he'd say the thing he always said. A wage is a promise, Ngozi, and a man who shaves it is a thief in a clean shirt. He said it because he knew. Year after year, they shaved his, a little off the overtime, his hours rounded down, a strange charge now and then that no one could ever quite explain. Small enough that most men would let it go, and Bayo let it go, because Bayo was tired, and Bayo was proud, and Bayo believed that if you kept your head down and worked hard, it would come out right in the end. Here is the part that broke her heart. She could see it. She was the one person in that whole depot who could read those slips and prove, line by line, exactly what they were doing to him. And she begged him, more than once, to let her fight it. He'd take her hand across the table and shake his head. It's not worth it, love. They'll only make it harder. Men like us don't win those. And she would fold the slip away and swallow it, because you cannot force a proud man to be angry on his own behalf. Bayo died before any of it was ever said right. He worked, and he was cheated, and he went quietly, and the men who did it never paid a single cent. She kept his gloves. top drawer, wrapped in a cloth. She could not throw them away. On hard nights, she would take them out and hold them, and feel the shape his hands had left in the leather, and she would talk to him a little in the dark. But she had a son, and their son grew up good. Chidi was kind the way his father was kind, and he worked the way his father worked. He'd taken a job as a prep cook at an upscale busy bistro in the middle of the city, a place called the Blackthorn. Long shifts on his feet, prepping vegetables before dawn, hauling out the trash, learning the line, doing the jobs nobody ever thanks you for. He never complained. He was saving up, slowly, to train as a chef one day. He wanted a life. He wanted to build something. Ngozi was proud of him in a way that felt like sunlight. And then, one gray afternoon, Chidi came to her door with his face all wrong, and he put a piece of paper down on her table. And 31 years of payroll, and one lifetime of watching a good man be robbed, rose up inside her like a tide coming in. Let me tell you what had happened to him. At the Blackthorn, there was a fire door at the back of the kitchen, the emergency exit, the way out if the fires ever caught. And someone had chained it shut, padlocked through the bar during service. Because an open door let in the cold, and because it was easier that way, and because no one thought a busy night would ever be the night. Chidi saw it, and it frightened him. He thought about all the people packed into that hot kitchen with the fryers spitting. He told the manager, a man named Gavin Pike. He told him once, and Gavin waved him off. He told him twice. Gavin told him to mind his own station and stop being a problem. So Chidi did the right thing, the brave thing. He filed a formal report with the fire marshal's office so it could never be ignored, so no one would ever be trapped behind a locked door on the worst night of their life. 2 weeks later, the Blackthorn let him go. Oh, they didn't say it was the report. They were far too clever for that. They wrote that he wasn't a team fit, that he had an attitude problem, lies. But on paper, it looked clean, tidy, the way these things always do. And then came the last little cut. When Chidi's final pay slip came, there was a charge on it he had never agreed to. A neat, confident line near the bottom. Loss and breakage, $47.20. $47.20, taken straight out of the wages of a young man who'd just been thrown away for telling the truth about a locked fire door. That was the paper he put on her table. Chidi sat down and put his head in his hands. It's my word against the whole restaurant, Mom, he said. Who's going to believe a prep cook over a manager? Just let it go. Just let it go. She had heard those exact words before, across a different table, from a different tired man she had loved. And she had let it go then, and he had died, and it had never been made right. But Ngozi was not looking at her son. She was looking at that number, because she knew something Chidi did not. That charge was not a mistake. You cannot lawfully take money out of a person's wages like that, not without their signed agreement, not below the minimum they're owed, not this way. It was against the law, plain and flat and simple. And there was more. A man does not invent a neat, oddly exact little charge like that for one worker, one time. $47.20, to the penny. A number that clean is a habit. A man who does this does it to everyone he thinks is too frightened to check. It isn't an accident. It's a system. And a system leaves a trail. She folded the payslip very carefully and put it in her purse next to nothing else. That night she did not sleep. She sat by the window with Bio's gloves in her lap, and she made the decision she had not been allowed to make for her husband. The kind of decision that changes everything. She was not going to beg the blackthorn for mercy. She was not going to hire some lawyer they could bury under their own lawyers and drag out for 2 years. She was going to walk into that restaurant herself. She was going to tie on their apron with her own 2 hands. And she was going to make Gavin Pike do the exact same thing to her that he had done to her son. On paper, in writing, in front of witnesses. She would gather every slip, every name, every date. She would build it brick by brick from the inside until it could stand up in a room and not be shouted down. Nobody at the Blackthorn had ever met Chidi's mother, and she had kept her own name, not his. To them, she would be exactly what she looked like. A tired older woman, looking for a little work. The safest person in the world to rob. Or so they would think. She got the job in a morning. They were always short of dishwashers at the Blackthorn. People never lasted. The first thing that happened to her was kindness. A young woman came out of the steam with a smile that could warm a cold room and took her by the arm. "You're the new one. Come in, come in. Don't be nervous. I'm Rosa. I'll show you everything." And Rosa did. Where the aprons hung, where the good gloves hid so they wouldn't walk off, how the big sink filled and drained, how to stack the racks so the whole tower didn't crash. She talked fast and gentle, the way people do when they're trying to make a hard place feel softer than it is. Then Rosa's voice dropped low. She glanced at the door. "One thing. The manager, Gavin. Just keep your head down, do your work, don't ask him questions, and whatever you do, don't argue with him about your pay. It only gets worse if you argue." Ngozi nodded, and she tucked those words away with everything else. She did not have to wait long to understand them. Gavin Pike came in like the whole kitchen owed him money. 30s, sharp shirt, a little pad he carried like a badge, and a way of looking at people that made them feel 2 inches tall. His eyes swept over Ngozi, the gray hair, the worn coat, the steady stillness, and she watched him decide, in 1 single second, that she was nobody. He didn't even bother with a name. "New girl," he said, and pointed her at the sink. And he thought that was funny, a woman her age, so he laughed. Ngozi tied on her apron. She pulled the yellow gloves over her hands. And here is what caught in her chest as she did it. Bio had worn leather, cracked and shaped to his fingers. Hers were thin and cheap and yellow. But the water was the same water he'd stood in his whole life. And the theft, she already knew, was the same theft. So she washed his dishes, and she smiled at the young ones running past. And all the while, her eyes stayed open, watching, learning, counting. What she saw in those first days told her everything. On the second day, a boy named Tomas, 20 at most, hands shaking, never met your eye, came off shift and stood out back by the dumpster, staring at his phone, all the color gone out of his face. Ngozi asked, gently, if he was all right. "It's my pay," he whispered. "He docked me again. 40-some bucks. Says I broke something. I don't even remember breaking anything." He gave a small, dead little laugh, the laugh of someone who stopped expecting fairness a long time ago. He does it to all of us, the new ones mostly. You'll get yours. Just don't fight it. Trust me. Ngozi asked, very softly, if she could see the slip. And there it was. That neat, confident line. Loss and breakage. $47.20. The same number. To the penny. The same number that was folded in her purse right now, sitting on her son's name. Over the next 2 weeks, quietly, one at a time, she saw more. Because the frightened workers of the Blackthorn trusted the kind old woman at the sink, she never judged, she never gossiped, she only listened. Priya, a young waitress who wired money home to her mother every month, docked the same the week her rent was due. A dishwasher before her docked the same right up until he quit. Rosa herself, months back, docked the same, $47.20, again and again and again. She photographed each one with their blessing. She wrote down every name and every date in a small notebook, the way she'd kept books for 31 years. Plain, exact, the kind of record no one could argue with. And she noticed the one thing that mattered most. Gavin always wrote the charge himself, on his own pad, in his own hand, and he initialed it every time, proud as anything, G.P., because he was certain those little initials would never mean a thing to anyone. She saw one more thing, too. On her way past the back wall, a stack of clean racks in her arms, she saw the fire door. Still chained, still padlocked shut. The very door her son had begged them to fix. The door he'd been thrown out for. Nobody had touched it. She stood in front of it for a long moment, and she felt her heart go hard and quiet and certain. Chidi had been right. Chidi had been brave, and they had punished him for it and stolen from him on his way out the door. She said nothing. She kept washing. Because Ngozi had almost everything now. The names, the dates, the pattern, running back a full year, a whole wall of the same stolen number. But she was missing one last piece. The piece that would turn it from a stack of other people's paper into a trap that snapped shut on Gavin Pike himself. She needed him to do it to her. On his pad, in his own hand, with those proud little initials, in front of people who would remember. So tomorrow, she was going to give him a reason. Tomorrow, she was going to break something small. And then, for the first time since she'd walked through that door, she was going to argue. Gavin Pike was about to write that number one more time, and he had no idea he'd be signing his own name to the very thing that would end him. If you're already rooting for her, you'll want to stay for what happens in that hearing room. Take a second to subscribe so it finds you. The next evening, in the middle of the dinner rush, with the kitchen loud and Gavin standing right there by the pass, Ngozi let a single plate slip from her fingers. It hit the tiles and broke. Small, ordinary. The kind of thing that happens 40 times a week in any busy kitchen on earth. Gavin was on her before the pieces stopped moving. "That plate you dropped?" he said, loud enough for the line to hear. He had that pad out already. "It's coming out of your pay." He was writing before she'd said a word. "Which plate?" Ngozi said, soft, almost kind. "Don't play deaf." And there it was, in his own hand. Loss and breakage, $47.20. And then, at the bottom, proud as a signature, those two small letters, G.P. For 2 weeks, she had washed his dishes and swallowed everything with a still face. Now, for the first time, she looked up from the sink, and she raised her voice just enough. "You can't take that," she said. Calm, clear. $47 for one plate. That's more than half a day's pay, and you can't lawfully take it out of my wages without my agreement. That's not a rule. That's theft. The whole kitchen went quiet. Rosa froze with a plate in her hand. Tomas stared. Nobody argued with Gavin about their pay. Ever. And Gavin, well, something lit up behind his eyes, because a man like Gavin doesn't fear the ones who cry. He feeds on the ones who fight, so he can show everyone what happens to them. A tired old dishwasher talking back in front of his whole staff? This was a gift. You, he said, tearing the top sheet off his pad and holding it up like a trophy, have just earned yourself a disciplinary. Breakages, misconduct, answering back to a manager. He smiled. We do it by the book here, lady. There'll be a formal hearing, and then you'll be gone, and everyone here will remember exactly why. He thought he was ending her. Here's what Gavin Pike did not know. 4 days earlier, Ngozi had done one quiet thing on her own kitchen table, the way she'd done 10,000 times in 31 years of payroll. She had written a letter, a plain, precise letter, to the regional office of the Blackthorn's owners, flagging serious and repeated irregularities in wage deductions at this branch. No drama, no names of her own, just the calm handwriting of a woman who knew exactly which words make an office upstairs sit forward in its chair. So when the hearing was set, a message came back down the line that lifted Gavin clean off his feet. The regional manager, a woman named Ms. Rowe, would be attending in person. Gavin was thrilled. His boss, coming all this way to watch him deal with a problem employee, by the book, doing everything right. He pressed his shirt. He was going to put on a show. He never once stopped to ask why a regional manager would drive across the city for one dismissed dishwasher. The morning of the hearing, they sat Ngozi in a small back office with a screen on the wall. Gavin at the head of the table, pad in front of him, chin up. Ms. Rowe beside him, gray suit, sharp eyes, a thin folder of her own, saying nothing yet. And Ngozi across from them, in her worn coat, with one plain folder resting on her knee. Gavin cleared his throat, and he began to enjoy himself. Let's keep this simple, Gavin said, sliding a sheet toward Ms. Rowe. Repeated breakages, poor attitude, and, as of last night, openly arguing with management on the floor, in front of staff. I don't think there's much to discuss. I think we all know how this ends. He looked at Ngozi with a little smile, ready for her to cry, or beg, or crumble. Ngozi did none of those things. Before you dismiss me, she said quietly, may I show the panel something? It won't take long. Miss Rowe, who had not spoken once, tilted her head. Go ahead. Ngozi stood. She connected her phone to the screen on the wall. She had asked one of the young staff to show her how, days before. And the first image bloomed up huge and bright, big enough to fill the whole wall. It was a pay slip, not hers, a young man's, printed clear. This is Tomas, she said. He works your dish pit right now. Look at the bottom line. She let them read it. Loss and breakage, $47.20. Last month. She pressed her thumb and the image changed. This is Priya, one of your waitresses. Same charge. $47.20. The month before. The screen changed again. And here, $47.20. And here, $47.20. And here, name after name after name. a dishwasher who quit in the spring, a busser from last fall, Rosa herself months back. Week after week after week, going back a full year, the very same number, the very same neat, confident line, on the wages of the newest people, the youngest people, the most frightened people in that building, the ones Gavin was certain would never dare to check. Ngozi's voice never rose. She simply named them one at a time and let that wall of stolen money climb higher and higher behind her head. $47.20, she said. To the penny, every time. A number that clean is not an accident. It's a habit. And I spent 31 years in payroll, so let me be plain about what I'm looking at. You cannot take money like this from a worker's wages, not without their signed agreement, not below what they're owed. This is not a fee. She turned and looked at him. It's theft, repeated, on the record, for a year. And every one of these slips carries your initials at the bottom, Mr. Pike. G.P. in your own hand. For 1 second, the room was completely silent. And then Gavin did what men like Gavin cannot help but do, even cornered, even with the wall lit up behind them. They agreed to it, he snapped, rounding on the screen, on the names, on the whole frightened crowd of them who weren't even in the room. They all agreed. It's standard. You sign on when you start, and you can't trust a word out of people like kids, dishwashers, half of them barely. People like that will say anything. People like what, Mr. Pike? Ms. Rowe said. Her voice was very cold, and it stopped him dead. She turned her thin folder around and set it flat on the table. I didn't drive here for a dishwasher, she said. Days ago, the regional office received a letter about the deductions at this branch. I've spent the last 2 days pulling this branch's own payroll records. Your records. She tapped the folder. Every figure this woman just put on that wall matches ours exactly. To the penny. For a year. Gavin's mouth opened. Nothing came out. But Ngozi was not finished, because the wall of names was the case. What came next was something else entirely. 2 more, she said softly. 2 more slips, and then I'm done. She pressed her thumb. This one, she said, is mine. From your kitchen, from this month. Loss and breakage, $47.20. And then, for the last time, she pressed her thumb, and her voice, for the first time all morning, carried the smallest tremor of something very deep and very old. And this one is from last month. A young prep cook who worked this kitchen. You wrote that he had a bad attitude and let him go. What he actually had was the courage to report that the fire door in this kitchen was chained shut during service. The same door that is still chained shut in your kitchen right now to the fire marshal's office. 2 weeks after he filed that report, you fired him. And on his way out, you charged him a loss and breakage fee. The last 2 slips lit up on the same wall, enormous. The whole pattern still glowing above them. 2 people, weeks apart. No reason on earth to be connected. The same number, to the penny. $47.20, Ngozi said. His and mine. Miss Rowe looked from one slip to the other. Who, she said slowly, is he? Ngozi folded her hands on top of her plain little folder. She looked Gavin Pike dead in the eye, and she told him the one thing he had never once thought to ask. He's my son. You could watch it hit him in pieces. First the confusion, then the slow, sick, dawning understanding rolling over his face like a shadow crossing a wall. The new girl, the old temp at his sink he'd laughed at, the invisible woman he had docked and mocked and dared to write up. She hadn't been nobody. She had walked into his restaurant on purpose, tied on that apron on purpose, broken that plate on purpose. Every coin he'd taken, every proud word, every one of those little initials. She had been collecting it, all of it, from the first day. And he had handed it to her himself. "You set me up," he whispered. "This is a trap." "Yes," Ngozi said, "it was. And you walked into it every single day because you couldn't imagine a woman who looked like me could ever be anything but beneath you." She reached up and gathered her son's slip and her own gently off the screen. "That was your mistake, Mr. Pike. Not that you were cruel, that you were so sure your cruelty was safe." Ms. Rowe closed her folder. She did not open it again. What followed did not take long, because the truth, once it's standing in the room, works fast. Gavin Pike was suspended that same hour and dismissed within the week. Not by a clever trick, but by his own pad, his own initials, his own habit repeated 100 times until it finally caught up with him in a small back office. A full report went to the State Labor Board for the wage theft, and every worker he had quietly robbed was found and repaid to the last cent, going back as far as the records reached. And each one was told plainly that they had the right to make a claim against him personally. Tomas cried when they told him. So did others. They had stopped believing a long time ago that anyone would ever make it right. The fire door was unchained the very next morning. The padlock came off. The door Chidi had begged them to open, the door that had cost him his job, swung free on its hinges at last, the way it always should have. And Chidi's case barely had to fight. Faced with the wall of matching slips, his own final pay slip, the letter, the safety report, and a mother who had documented every single thing with 31 years of a payroll clerk's precision, the Blackthorn did not dare go to war. They settled. They paid him what he was owed and more, and they wrote it down in a formal letter that his dismissal had been wrong and that his safety report had been correct and brave and right all along. Chidi read that letter at the same kitchen table where, weeks before, he'd put his head in his hands and said, "Just let it go." He read it twice. Then he looked up at his mother. "You didn't just get my money back, Mom," he said. "You made them say it, in writing, that I was right." But Ngozi did not simply walk away. She stayed. She could have left that kitchen the moment it was done, but she didn't. Not right away. She took off her coat, and she asked Rosa to show her, properly this time, how the whole place ran. She learned their names. She heard their troubles. And before that week was out, she made Rosa the new shift lead. Not because Rosa asked. Rosa would never have dared ask. But because Ngozi had watched her, frightened half to death, still stop to warm a cold room for a stranger at the sink. That, Ngozi told her, was the only kind of person who should ever run a kitchen. Rosa protested that she wasn't ready. Ngozi told her she'd been ready for years. The only thing that had ever stopped her was a man who fed on other people's fear, and that man was gone. And she left them one more thing. She wrote it out in her plain, careful hand, and she pinned it to the wall right where Gavin's pad used to sit. The thing Bio used to say every night, rubbing his sore hands by the window. A wage is a promise. A man who shaves it is a thief in a clean shirt. That night, at home, Ngozi took Bio's gloves out of the top drawer. Cracked leather, worn soft, still holding the shape of his hands after all these years. And she talked to him a little in the dark, the way she still did. She told him she'd found the theft. She told him she'd pulled it out by the root. She told him a boy's fire door was open now, and the frightened ones had their money back, and their son had it in writing that he was right. She told him she hadn't let it go this time. Then she wrapped the gloves back in their cloth. And for the first time in a long time, the house did not feel quite so quiet. Here is what I want you to carry away from Ngozi's story. The world looks at a person, their gray hair, their worn coat, the gloves on their hands, and decides they are small, decides they are safe to steal from. And the cruel ones grow bold, a coin at a time, because no one ever makes them pay. But do not mistake a quiet person for a weak one. Some of the strongest people you'll ever meet are the ones who take the insult with a still face. Not because they are beaten, but because they are patient. They are gathering the truth, one piece at a time, and waiting for the day it can stand up in the light and be counted. Bio believed men like him don't win those fights. He was wrong. He just needed someone who refused to let it go. So pay people what you promise them, not because you might get caught, but because a wage is a promise. And how you treat the ones you're sure can do nothing to you is the truest thing you will ever say about who you really are.